Waiting for the stream to catch up. Make sure it's actually going out there. All right, give it just a second. I'm gonna put my faith in the system and think that it is working the way that it did last time, which has bit me in the past, but not today. Fabulous. All right, we're good to go. Welcome to the Rasa Livestream. Today, we're going to be going through the very early part of chatbot development. So this is something that I've gotten, I don't know, I wouldn't say a lot of feedback about, but I've gotten some questions about. So once you've got Rasa installed, you've got everything set up, you do Rasa init and you get moodbot, which is, by the way, what this little sample project that comes with Rasa is called. So this one where you say, hello, and it's like, how are you feeling? And you're like, I'm sad. And you get this, if this was rendered, it would be an image of a baby tiger. And you have this, very useful, complex conversation. This is moodbot. And at that point, what do you do? So I have a little mini PRD almost here for the project that we're going to be building today. So all I've done so far, I have installed Rasa, I ran Rasa init, I'll scroll up to where I did that. So I just opened my conda environment, I did Rasa init, I'm in a new directory, I haven't changed anything except to add this readme doc with a PRD. I trained my model and I talked to it. So we're starting from not 0, 1, let's say, and we're going to take the moodbot and change it into a different assistant. So this assistant is for this is all fictional, I made up a company. The company Sammy's Sandwiches, a family-owned restaurant that serves sandwiches. I don't know, I feel like sandwiches are pretty common. They're a type of foodstuff where you have bread, and then in between the bread you have different fillings. For those of you who are not familiar with sandwiches, I assume most of you are, but you never know. I don't want anyone to feel left out. They get a lot of repeated questions on their Telegram. Hi, Ricky, welcome to the stream. And want to have a simple bot to answer those questions. They're open 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Monday through Friday. So a lunch place, probably near some offices that are trying to get the office workers who need to go out and get lunch, which is pretty common in the US. And do not take reservations. And they are getting these 3 FAQs a lot. What time do you open? What time do you close? And do you take reservations? So they want a system that can just automate these questions that they're getting a lot of to help out and work more efficiently. So we're going to build an assistant that can do that. And the thing that we're going to use to do that is called FAQs, or response selectors. So if you have been on the docs recently, there's this section in the docs, chit chat FAQs, that goes through the steps that you need to do to build an FAQ assistant. And the way that works basically is through a combination of rules. When a specific question is detected, you always get the same answer. And also, I don't want to get, well, we can get a little bit deep into it. So as part of the NLU pipeline, when an intent is identified, if an intent is identified as belonging to the set of frequently asked questions, then a new intent classifier that's sort of nested within the first one determines which of the frequently asked questions has just been asked, and the rule selects the answer. So that's the way it works from under the hood. Suki asks if there's a Telegram link. This is a fake company. They do not have a Telegram account. Apologies. And we're also not going to be doing deployment today. I don't know, maybe we'll do deployment in the future. I've honestly never used Telegram before, but I know it is pretty common for this type of application. Ricky says, I'm way ahead of this in my Rasa development, but I want to see the nostalgia of where I was 3 months ago. Oh, nice. I hope your project's going well. So these are the steps, and these are right from the docs. Right now it would be difficult for me to show you a web page, but I have literally copied and pasted the to-do list at the end of the docs. Add rule policy to your policies and response selector to your pipeline in config.yaml. This one right here. Add at least 1 rule for responding to FAQ/chitchat. Add examples for your FAQ/chitchat intents. Add responses for your FAQ/chitchat intents. Update the intents in your domain. And I did a bad job copying. There should be an N at the end there. So these are the things we're going to need to add. But we're also going to need to remove some things. So if we look at our domain right now, so these are all the things that our assistant can do. The assistant can greet, it can say goodbye, it can say yes or no, it can say, detect that, sorry, this is not things your assistant says, these are intents, these are things your users say. They can say greet or goodbye, affirm or deny, that they're feeling in a good way or a bad way, mood great or mood unhappy, and ask whether or not the assistant is real. So we have a very simple assistant that we are uh, building here. I am going to say we definitely don't need these two intents that have to do with moves because that's not relevant for our new use case. So I'm just going to get rid of these, and then I'm going to have to go through and delete the training data later. I am going to keep this greet intent here because people might say hello to our assistant to begin the conversation. And I am going to keep this goodbye intent here. So if people say bye, we can say bye just to be polite. And I also don't think we need the affirm and deny intents. So if I knew I was going to continue working on this assistant in the future and add additional functionality, I might keep these. But again, it's a very simple assistant that we have right now, so I'm going to get rid of these. I am going to keep the bot challenge. So this is somebody asks, hey, are you a robot, or is this a real person, or something like that. You should always respond truthfully. I am a chatbot, so that users have the correct expectations of the system. Also, you're not deceiving people. Don't do that. So those things we can just completely get rid of. And then we have some responses here. I think we can keep this utter greet. We may want to rewrite it a little bit. So it says something like, this is Sammy. What did I call this fake restaurant? I think I called it Sammy Sandwiches. Yeah, Sammy Sandwiches. Hi, this is Sammy Sandwiches. Can we help you? This utter cheer up, we're not going to need. This utter did that help, we're not going to need. So these were things that happened in the course of the conversation, or could happen in the course of this conversation for moodbot. We don't need it for our new assistant, so I'm just getting rid of them. Utter happy, we don't need. Goodbye, I'm going to keep because we kept this goodbye intent. So if somebody says goodbye to me, I want to say goodbye back. I want to be polite. And then I'm going to keep this utter I am a bot powered by Rasa. We always want to be truthful and have that ability. So we've tidied up the domain file. We've gotten rid of everything we didn't want. I'm going to hold off adding things until we're done removing things that aren't relevant to us. Endpoints we're not going to touch right now. Credentials we're not going to touch right now. So these are things you would look at more in the deployment stage of things. And the config, we're going to want to do some specific changes in terms of what this looks like. We have the response selector. And we have the rule policy. Actually, I lied. We don't need to do anything. The default policy has both of the things that we need. So we don't even need to touch the config. And I am going to add a little check mark there. I realize that that is not the syntax for markdown checkbox. This is just for my utility. So we're good with that. We don't need to touch the config again. Let's take a look at the actions. I don't believe this is going to run. Yep, so we can just ignore this. There's no actions in moodbot. Models, we're going to need to retrain a model. We have one trained model here. I'm just going to delete it because I don't want to. I'm going to really dramatically change the utility of this assistant, and I don't want to have an old model sticking around that might confuse people. If I'm updating an existing assistant, I probably wouldn't do this. I'd probably just save this data. I might remove it in a specific, update of my system, but I would still be able to go back to my version control and check for previous updates. And tests we're not going to look at right now. We will deal with them a little bit later. Data, we're going to have to do some cleanup here. So we want to remove the data that supports the functionality that we don't need. And then later on, we will add the data that supports the functionality that we do need. Hey, Chris, good to see you. Question, Brookie says, are we still answering the advanced certification for Rasa, or has that been discontinued? Currently, the advanced certification has been discontinued. Yeah, we completely redid our developer certification early October. So it should be automated. It should be, I think, a better evaluation of your abilities as a Rasa developer. But yeah, there's other certifications that we're thinking of. No promises. Right now, everybody's pretty much all hands on deck for the 3.0 launch. When's that going to happen? It'll be a surprise. I hope you're all excited for 3.0. I believe this assistant is 2.8.0 if you're watching in the future. So cleaning up our data. We'll start with the NLU. So first of all, we just want to get rid of the intents and the examples for the intents that we no longer have. So greet should be good, we kept that. Goodbye should be good, we kept that. Affirm and deny we did not keep, so I'm just going to get rid of these. Mood great and mood unhappy, again, we did not keep, so I'm just going to get rid of these. Goodbye. So right now, the only intents that we have training data for are greet, goodbye, and bot challenge. And if we look at our domain, those are the only 3 intents that we have remaining. And we'll add some more stuff later on. I'm just removing all the functionality we don't need for now. And then for rules, I actually want to keep both of these rules. So we have this rule that says, if the user says goodbye, I say goodbye. And we have kept both the goodbye utterance and the goodbye intent. We should be fine there. And you always need a rule to let people know that your bot's a bot. So we're just not going to touch that. Nothing to change there. In our stories, basically, we're going to want to delete every story that uses an intent we don't use. And that's going to be more or less all of them. So we don't deal with moods at all. So let's get rid of that. Sad path. Yep, we don't need that. We're probably going to end up deleting all our stories. Yep. And then this one we also do not need. So right now we have no stories. I'm actually going to keep one just as to do delete this story. It's just, I'm going to keep it as a syntax example because I find it easiest to copy and edit, but just a syntax example, but we will need to remove it before we actually do anything with our assistant because it references intents that we removed. All right. Chris says, I'm too attached to my old models. I always keep them in a backup folder. I would recommend doing that, yeah. In this particular case, I know that I'm never going to need the pre-trained moodbot again. But have I said that in the future? Has it bitten me in the past? Yes. Have I said that in the past about the future, and have I been wrong? Yes. So I applaud the hoarding of old models. All right. So at that point, I think we've pretty much done everything we need to do to remove functionality that we don't have, except we have this one story that hasn't been used. So the next thing we should do is we should think about these FAQs. So this is the PRD. This is what the customer's given me in this fantasy where I'm building a chatbot for this imaginary restaurant that doesn't exist. What time do you open? What time do you close? And do you take reservations? Do you take reservations? I think we can handle in a single, intent. I think that'll be fine. What time do you open and what time do you close? So these might have been originally imagined as 2 different questions by the humans who are currently answering them a lot. But I think what's going to be simplest and most extensible in the future is to actually treat these as the same intent. So let me pop down here. I'm going to start a new section. Implementation details. Also, I'm going to misspell some stuff. It's fine. It's no big deal. So I'm going to have 2 FAQ intents. One for asking about the schedule, and one for reservations. And the reason that I'm not having open and close be 2 separate intents is there's a lot of token overlap between them, right? So I'm asking about time. The sort of the general topic of both is the same. And I can reply to both of those questions with the same answer, right? So what time do you open? We open at 11 and close at 2. What time do you close? We open at 11 and close at 2, right? So you can just respond with the schedule for the restaurant to any type of question that is asking about the schedule of the restaurant. I don't think that's how you spell schedule, but we're gonna roll with it. That's fine. It looks close enough. Y'all know what I mean. So I'm gonna slightly redo the data organization there. And the other things that are important, we're going to need a flow for greeting plus question. I'm going to add an out of scope intent as well. So people asking about things that the assistant can't do. So some specific things that I imagine you might ask a restaurant chatbot that we're not going to answer here might be the menu, might be talk to a person, maybe. I think that's going to be really close to some of the intent training data for the are you a bot intent. So I might put a question mark in front of that. That's a maybe. But definitely the menu, definitely the allergens. I don't want to have my assistant, mislead somebody about whether or not they can get gluten-free food at the restaurant. And also it might change day to day, right? They may have a kitchen that's, only 1 week a month does celiac state stuff, for example. I don't know what their whole thing is. So, and I don't want to answer that with a chatbot. I want to make sure that someone is talking to a person. So I want a way to do that. So these are actually both part of the intents implementation. So I'm just gonna and then for the conversation flow, for the conversation flow, I think I'm going to have a flow for greeting and well, we definitely need a flow for greetings, right? Because we don't currently have a rule for what happens when somebody says hi, even though somebody can say hi to the assistant. Flow for out of scope or rules. So when I say flow here, I mean story. So I think I want a story for greeting. I think I want a rule for out of scope. And I definitely want a rule for FAQs. So I think that's what I'm going to do there. And I don't know that for this very simple assistant, there's anything else I'm going to need a story for. We might add some additional functionality later, but I think for now, this is what I'm going to do. Now let's do it. Check in with the chat. Hi, Chukuri. Welcome to the chat. Apologies if I'm saying that wrong. So let's start by adding our domains, adding our intents to our domain. So we have one that's going to be out of scope. And then also we're going to add one for FAQs. And I am just looking at the syntax example. I have, where's my README? There we go. I have this page open over here where you can't see it. And I'm just looking at the syntax example for that in the domain. Okay, so I'm just going to have in the domain, I'm going to have a single FAQ intent because, as I mentioned, the way that response selectors, FAQs, chit chat work is you identify the meta intent. Then there's a second round of intent classification for identifying within that FAQ, which of these questions is it that's been answered. It does not have to be called FAQ. That's just what I want to call it for now. And I'm actually going to have it be lower space just so it looks a little bit more consistent. And then we're also going to need some responses. Since I am right in here, I'm going to add the responses right now. So I'm going to call it utter FAQ because that's what I called this intent. And I'm going to have one for schedule. So ask, SECH. And that's how I'm going to spell schedule. And That's all there is to it. And from there, I'm just going to copy and paste the schedule information from our little PRD. It was in the domain. It's text. I could add, if I had, also probably going to want to be in the first person for there. If I had an image of the schedule I wanted to share or like a link to a calendar app or something, I could do that here, but I'm just going to do it text for now. And the other thing that we had was about reservations. And I know that this is a fictional restaurant that I've made up, but I'm getting the real, it's a sort of a walk up where you only give them cash. Maybe it's like one of those little, like a building where there's a half wall and you go up and you order through the half wall. Counter? I guess that's a counter. We don't take reservations. And I'm gonna be a little extra polite because this is American customer service and you can never be too polite. Sorry, we don't take reservations. Okay, so we've got our responses to our FAQs. And then we have, let's also add a out of scope response. And I'm just trying to keep my naming conventions consistent. And I believe the quote demarcation is optional. However, it's been used throughout, so I'm just, again, going to keep it consistent. Please stop auto-completing my quotes. I hate it. Oh, they listened. Okay. I'm afraid I can't answer that. Try calling in at XXX. No, I'm just going to do a number, a fake number. This is not a real telephone number, but it follows the syntax of one. Okay, so I think we are good there, and I'm also going to move this up so it's above all of the response selector responses, just so it's a little bit more, what have I done wrong? I've not closed my quotes. Just so it's a little bit more consistent with what's going on. All right, and I don't need this white space. Great, okay, so I think we are good to go with all of our responses. So we are doing this extremely out of order, but imagine that we're not also updating the intents. I believe we have also done correctly, and we'll find out when I try to train my model, I guess. So we want to add a rule. So because we have two responses, two intents, we want to make sure whenever the question is identified, we respond with the answer to the question. So let's make sure that that syntax is right. And again, I'm just looking over at the docs. I don't have this memorized. Rules. So we have a couple of rules. Scroll, 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 scroll. All right. And I'm going to straight up copy and paste this. So this is straight out of the docs. And also indented bad. There we go. Cool. And that should work because our naming conventions were consistent. And this utter FAQ here, if I go back to my domain, you can see that these both start with other FAQ. So it's going to select from among those sub actions of the top action of utter FAQ, if that makes sense. So we should be good to go there. Rules, check. Did I decide to do let me check my implementation details. Did I decide to do a rule for out of scope? Okay, so let's also add that as well. So whenever, I'll basically do this one again. Respond to out of scope questions. And the intent is going to be this out of scope intent with underlines. and then no, and then we want to respond with utter out of scope. And I'm copy and pasting because I cannot trust myself to type the same thing more than once. Oh, okay. So that should be good to go. And the other thing that we wanted to do was add a story. Get rid of that to do. And there's not really anything that needs to go on in the middle here. So this may be a kind of a weird conversation. We'll see when we test it out. That's why you do CDD, right? This is just the first stage of prototyping. Conversation-driven development, where people talking to your bot is part of your development process. For those of you who have somehow not heard of it, we talk about it a lot. All right, so I think we are mostly good to go. We've updated our rules, we've updated our stories, we've updated our domain. Now what we need to do is provide training data for the new intents that we have added. So we have 3 intents, and I am again going to copy and paste just to make double sure that my syntax is correct. All right, so when we're in our NLU data, and I'm just gonna add them down here at the end, and I again messed up the indentation. All right, so our response selector is not called chit chat, it's called FAQ. You can have more than one if you like. And then it was ask SECH. Is that right? Is that the first one we had about SECH? Yep. I don't think there's anything wrong with calling it ask schedule, except that I can't spell schedule. So that's a me problem. And if I could, then I probably would do that instead. All right. So we actually came with 2 example questions. What time do you open and what time do you close? So I'm going to start with those because those are, directly from the product requirements. All right. Ooh. 1 sec, sorry. Yeah, that's spaces. Okay. I just want to make sure I'm not mixing tabs and spaces. What's your schedule? When y'all open? When can I come in? Are you open now? Open now. Do you do dinner? So I think that's something that I would answer with a schedule question, because no, they don't. They only do lunch, and you can tell from looking at their schedule. Can I come in on Sunday? All right, so we have our just a little bit of sample data there about asking questions about scheduling, and we recommend around 7 examples, and here I've got 8, so that should be a good start. And as I continue to do CDD and fold more responses in, we'll have more and more. Will I do that with this assistant? Time will tell, probably not. For this this fake restaurant that we've made up. And then ask reservations, which again I'm going to copy and paste. All right. And this is going to be people asking about whether or not they take reservations. Okay. Can I make a reservation? I want a reservation for 2 at 6. That person is definitely barking up the wrong tree. And you probably noticed that there are some typos in here. That's intentional. I mean, that's how I type, and that's also how other people type. So we should probably be able to model that. And we should be able to handle that pretty well, because if we look at our config here, you can see that we have this count vectors featurizer, and then we have a second one where the analyzer is car_WB. And what that means is that this is a character level model. And a character level model can handle spelling variation in words because it's not always looking for the same surface form of the word from beginning to end. It's looking for, clusters of characters it's seen before. So as long as like enough of the characters are right, you should be able to handle spelling variation. So we should be covered here. And none of these are especially wild. Do you take reservations? And you may be thinking to yourself, Rachel, no one would ask for a reservation at a restaurant that, without even checking that they take reservations, they would. They 100% would. Right. Other ways that people might ask for reservations. Can I do a reserve? I don't know if that's how people shorten reservation, but it might be. I'm going to just search this in another tab. How do people shorten the word reservation? RSVP, I guess technically. All right, so I'm gonna go with S, because the Z ending is a different word that I think might be confusing and wrong. All right, can I do a res? I want to book a table. That might be some way that somebody might say this. How do I reserve a booth? A booth is like a place you can sit instead of a table. I just want one more. I probably am not going to need that many, but do you do reservations? A couple extra question marks there because I imagine you'll see a lot of question marks in these responses. All right, so I think we're all good. We have enough data to get started. And then we had one last one. Let me check. Out of scope. So let's add you as well to this NLU data. How many spaces are the right number of spaces? Fewer than I just did, as it turned out. So can I see a menu? Do you do gluten-free? Are you allergy friendly? Maybe, maybe not. Hard to say. You definitely want to talk to a chef. What else were we saying in the README that we were talking about? Maybe talking to a person. I'm not going to do this. And the reason that I'm not going to do this is because I think it's going to be, we don't have a lot of intents. And the intents that we do have are pretty distinct from each other. So I think that it's too likely that it will make the out of scope intent. I misidentify turns that are actually a bot challenge, and I would prefer not to. I think not having a robust bot challenge identification is a potential kind of big problem. Like, hopefully not too big, but might be something we want to avoid. Great. So we asked about a menu, we asked about allergies, other things we might want to ask about. Do you cater? Probably something you're going to want to talk to the restaurant about directly. Can I get a large pizza? Probably not something Sally's sandwiches do, or what did I call this restaurant? Sally sandwiches? Sammy sandwiches. Probably not something a place called Sammy sandwiches does. Probably no do pizza. I'm with Acme Insurance, and I want to know. So this is somebody like going, I guess, chatbot to chatbot. I was going to say door to door selling insurance, but chatbot to chatbot selling insurance. A modern day, was it Willie Nelson from? I don't think it's Willie Nelson from Death of a Salesman, right? What's his name? I'm never going to rest until I look it up here. Willie Loman, not Willie Nelson. Oof, they're gonna revoke my English degree. All right, and I want to know if you're covered. someone's going to say Bitcoin at some point, and you probably don't want to add a function to your bot to do that. All right, I think that's enough. Those things are all, I think, clearly out of scope for this, clearly out of scope for the bot, and clearly potentially out of scope for the restaurant. They might not be interested in it. So with that in mind, I think we're ready to train a model. And if the model trains well, then I'll go back and do the tests. But I imagine I'm going to have to do some debugging and that I will have missed something in there. There's probably some sort of typo. Let's find out. And we are 35 minutes in. Oh, she's training. Featurization. But there is no matching response defined. Please check your domain. All right, let me double check the docs really quick. I might have messed it up a little bit. Add responses. Check my domain. Utter FAQ. Utter FAQ. FAQ as an intent. I think I did it right. I'm gonna wait for the policy to change. Okay. All right, let's see if this works and how it goes. So, Rasa shell, talk to it in the shell. Oh, and I didn't change localhost to the IP address, so it's going to be a little bit slow because of the way that localhost is resolved on Windows. Hi, Ariel. Welcome to the stream. We're just testing to see if the bot that we've been building actually works. I was thinking. Oh, and I think I mentioned this latency is a Windows thing because I haven't gone through and changed the thing that makes it not be a thing. Unexpected 10 is experimental. We've had it out for a while. I don't know of any plans currently to remove it. But it is still experimental. All right, so what if we say hi? The assistant should say hi back. Hey, this is Sammy Sandwiches. Can we help you? Do you have pizza? So this should be identified as out of scope. Yeah, well, salads, because I had the word pizza in my training data, so I think that's going to be a little bit of too easy of a question. So, do you have salads? This should be identified as out of scope. Well, that didn't work. Okay. So what happened here is that this was misidentified as me saying goodbye. So let me see if do you have pizza works. Okay, so this was correctly identified as out of scope. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add this. I'm going to add this in here as an out of scope example. It does seem like there was just a person that was extremely rude, and the moment somebody said salad, they're like, no, and hung up the phone, which was not my intended. This is a chatbot for Sammy Sandwiches. Can we help you? And I'm going to change all of this parlance a little bit to make it clear that this is a chatbot. So if it says something unintentionally rude, then someone will understand that this is like an unanticipated behavior and not something like that. And I think this is a good example of something where the system output sounds rude, even though nothing intentionally rude was done. Does that make sense? I don't think it's an emergent behavior, which is surprising to me, the developer, and also not intended in terms of the way that customers are treated. All right, so we correctly got the out of scope intent to trigger. Now do the FAQs work? So When are y'all open? I'm pretty sure this is an exact example. Great. Okay, so that worked. Can I book the restaurant? Great. Okay, that worked. And then if I say bye, it'll say bye. Is this a real person? So let's add this is an example to our bot challenge, which I think, given the non sequitur answer to the question, it's pretty clear to me that the answer is no. But let's just add that to our bot challenge. I'm going to add a couple more examples. Are you real? This isn't this is a fake conversation, maybe. Are you fake, maybe might be a better way to say it. Chatbot, question mark? Okay, I think all of those things will be a little bit more helpful. But the core functionality is there. It does everything I expected it to do, more or less. So let's just quickly retrain our assistant and see if the extra training data that we added has done any good. Chris says that warning always appears with retrieval intents because there are no responses called purely utter FAQ, only utter FAQ/stuff. That sounds like a very minor but fixable issue. Am I logged into GitHub on this computer? Can I spell GitHub on this computer? I'm just gonna open a window and start. I would say that's a bug report. And then I'm just gonna say, when training an assistant with a retrieve response selector, a warning always appears about the response not being in the domain. And I'm just doing this as a little reminder to myself. And then I will double check that this isn't a, what am I looking for? User warning. And I want to double check that this isn't a duplicated issue. Okay, great. So we have retrained our assistant, and let's, I don't need to do slash nothing. Let's launch it and see if we have slightly better results this time around. And I also rewrote a couple of the interactions that the assistant had with user, just to make it clear, you know, this is a chatbot. If it does something rude, it's a chatbot. Actually, I'm also going to change the bye response a little bit. Bye. Hope to see you soon at, was it Sammy Sandwiches? Sammy's Sandwiches? Is that right? Sandwich. Nope. Sure ain't. There we go. All right. Sukafar says, how do I go a sentence classification? Any heads up, I have a large data set. Yes, so in the Rasa Conversational AI course, there is a video called, I believe, Intents and Training Data or something like that, where I walk through some strategies for handling a large training data set and figuring out how to organize it well so your assistant can use it. I do not remember the exact title of the video, so let me double check. Do. Training data and rules is what that video is called. So conversational AI with Rasa, training data and rules. And I go into a lot more detail about how to deal with that problem. All right, so let's really quickly, and did I get the same user warning again? Sure did. Okay, so let's do one more test conversation. And then honestly, I think we'll be done. We did everything that I meant for our system to be able to do. At this point, I'd want to get it in front of a person who is using it, try to get some more training data, fold that in. Oh, tests. We haven't written tests yet. Okay, so one more conversation, then we'll write tests. So we'll start with hi. Hey, this is chatbot for Sammy Sandwiches. Can I help you? Can I order online? This is a good one. You probably can't. Okay, I'm gonna... Actually, I think that is a perfectly fine outcome for this. Given our possible responses, I think this does actually answer this question. It almost has pragmatics to it. I do intend to do a video on pragmatics at some point because it's very important for conversations. I'm perfectly happy with this response, actually. I don't think we need to change anything here. Do you do... maybe I ask about something else, maybe like something, do you have vegan options? Nope, I'm gonna leave the typos in. Sorry, we don't take reservations. What if I didn't have the typos? Would that help? Do you have vegan options? And this should be, okay, so this should be out of scope. So I'm gonna add this as an example to my out of scope data as well, because that is not a correct question. And answering detailed questions about a menu, it takes a lot of specialized knowledge. And I think you probably could do it with a chatbot, but it would only make sense for, you know, a restaurant where you have a pretty stable menu. So like for a fast food chain, I think it would make a lot of sense. For like a small family restaurant that has one location, I think it doesn't make a lot of sense, and that it's going to save more time overall to just answer questions about the menu in person. And also, I imagine a small family chain like this changes their menu fairly often. They probably have seasonal offerings, and that would be hard to capture in a chatbot, and a lot of maintenance that I imagine they don't have time to do. Do you take reservations? Great, good to know. Can I get kimchi there? Great, sounds good, because that's a menu question, and that should be identified as out of scope, so that was identified correctly. Fantastic. And then I'm just gonna say bye, and I should get my new response. Bye. Did I not say my... Oh, I think I did this after I saved it. So this new response is just like a slightly more branded, slightly more customized way to say goodbye. All right. I think we're good. I think that's everything that we need to do. So let's just quickly, real quickly do our test, and we should be able to modify, you know, we should be able to modify our existing test stories. So I'm going to call this one reservations, and then I'm going to do one that's open time and the one that's closing time, because those are the specific use cases that are outlined in the PRD. And I would recommend, if there are specific use cases that, you know, are in the product requirements, you include them in your tests so that you can say, hey, look, it does the thing you hired me to make the system do. Or, you know, you can show to your manager. It's just good best practice, you know? So I'm going to call this reservations, greet, under greet. The user is going to say, do you take reservations? And then that should be identified as FAQ/ask res. I'm going to have to copy and paste. Ask reservations. Where was it? We were in the test stories.yaml. There we go. that should be the identified, that should be the identified intent, and the identified action should be the response about reservations. So it should be this action. All right, and I'm really quickly going to save this and run tests because the likelihood that I've made a syntax error is not 0. So I should just be able to run the test using Rasa test. We got a results generated. I'm just checking the time. I think we can definitely do this in under an hour. And of course, I am fairly familiar with Rasa, I would say. So I imagine that I'm able to do this a little bit more quickly than maybe somebody who is not super familiar with Rasa, but I think this is a fairly, realistic, if small prototyping example. Oh, okay, so we got something with the test stories that did not go well, and it might be, let's see the failed test stories. Okay, yep, and it was a syntax error, which I thought it might be. So I don't actually need to do the ask reservations part. All right, so also this hello there. I do not have a great accent for it, but it sounds like Obi-Wan Kenobi in my head. And I'm actually not going to have this greeting in there as well because we already have a test that can do that. I'm just going to have whatever the user says. When do you open? And then I'm going to have to the domain, schedule, and then utter FAQ, which should be the same. And then I'm going to add one out of scope. And I think in the out of scope story, I'm also going to do a goodbye test in there just in case. So the user is going to say something out of scope. And let's actually just use the example turn that we had earlier. Can I get kimchi there, which should be identified as out of scope, which I believe was with underscores, but I'm going to have to double check. Yes, it was. All right. And the intent there should be identified as out of scope. And then the response of the system should be utter out of scope, which I believe is all lowercase no spaces. Correct. All right. And now if we run our tests again, hopefully this time we will pass all of them. So Vin wants to know, hey Rachel, instead of adding many examples for out of scope, is it possible to put a higher threshold for intent identification and all the rest to get a default response utter out of scope? Great question. So that actually is already existing. That functionality already exists. It's called a fallback policy. So if you don't hit a specific confidence threshold, the fallback is triggered. The reason why an out of scope intent in particular is helpful is because it has, so for every turn, your assistant is always going to make a guess, right? Also, confusion matrix, nice. We fixed the issue. It was just a syntax thing with the test. So the reason why an out of scope intent is more helpful in this situation than a thresholding or fallback policy is that I can guess what sort of questions people are going to ask that my assistant can't answer, and I want a way to handle those. And I know that they're going to ask them, and I want a conceptually simple way for me to group those things together. Over the course of using the assistant, the types of out of scope questions that people ask will probably cluster, and there will probably be a few that are very common. I might use those to add, functionality to my assistant, or just as a way to have like a customized response to those specific things. Yes, so you can absolutely use the fallback threshold. often that ends up with a more frustrating conversation. For a very small assistant like this, you can use both. You can use them in tandem. Yeah. So yes, you can do that. In this case, I don't think it would be super helpful. Also, my data is not very big, so I'm probably going to have lower confidence than I would otherwise, unless someone is saying, like, exactly, do you cater? If that makes sense. So the more complex and your assistant and the larger the training data and the higher the confidence because the more data has been seen, the more likely a fallback policy is to be helpful. I hope that answered your question. I don't know. I rambled a bit there. Yeah. All right, so I think we're good to go. I minimized it, but if we look at our results, I believe we didn't have any failed test scores. All of our, core functionality works. If we look at our intent confusion matrix, we had one mistake where the heck does that say? Goodbye was accidentally identified as greet. Did we? I said I was going to have a goodbye example. I don't think I actually did. That's okay. I don't mind that much about that. That's a error that it doesn't bother me. It might be a little bit funny that the assistant use it. And then there was a classification error between FAQ and out of scope. So that might be something that we look at. Let's see. Okay. So here, good afternoon was identified as greet instead of goodbye. I think that's fine. This is an ambiguous utterance. You can use good afternoon for either of those things. Do you have any vegan options was identified as out of scope. Was out of scope, but was instead identified as FAQ with high confidence or really high confidence. Did I put that in the wrong section? I did not. Oh, I added that and then I didn't retrain the model. So when I retrain the model, that should be fixed. No problem. And these are, fairly small errors given the number of folds. So I'm not super worried about that. And it's that one. So it was the vegan one that's up here that I would be a little bit worried about, which would be something with high confidence that's wrong. And also to respond to Vin's question, that wouldn't, an out of scope intent could help capture this pattern. A threshold fallback policy wouldn't, right? So if your model is very confident but incorrect, and usually when you see high confidence and wrong outputs, it's generally down to too little training data or training data that is too non-representative of what your assistant is seeing in its outdoors life, in the wild, whatever term you want to use for that. Johnny wants to know, we ever develop an interface that adds intents and actions in a friendly way? So you can actually add intents through, I'm pretty sure you can add intents in Rasa X. Mostly, I mean, I'm a developer, so I like developer tooling and it doesn't bother me to do it in by editing YAML files, but I believe you can add intents and training data via Rasa X to an assistant that's a little bit more, visual and non-developer focused. Adding actions, I mean, utterances are actions, and you can add utterances in Rasa X, so that counts. But usually for actions, people are writing Python code. Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna go through the results, and I'm gonna go on a little bit of a tirade. Not a tirade, just like a little discussion that I think might be helpful. All right. And then intents, looking good. Okay. Sorry, that base is that these are all 1, which makes me skeptical. I want to see high numbers that are close to 1, but if everything's 1, why is that? And in this case, I think it's just that there are fewer examples for that intent than others. So I'm not super worried about it, but I'd keep an eye on that, particularly if there tends to be a lot of, problems in the future. And here I'm just looking for things being on the diagonal. Looks good. No test story warnings. Mostly on the diagonal, actually all on the diagonal. And here we have higher confidence, and this is less of an issue with the actions happening next, because a lot of our system is rule-based, and I would expect very consistent behavior from rules, less consistent than I'd expect a lot of ones from rules because they're always yes or no. I would expect fewer ones from a more machine learning system that's a little bit fuzzier. So if we did anything with TED and nothing has happened with TED, then I would expect things not to be one after cross-validation. That was a very quick discussion of the results. Basically, what I'm saying is I didn't see any big red flags. We did a video going much more deeply into the results a couple weeks ago, so you can go check that out if you have questions. No, I'm so sorry. So asking about the ability to sort sentences into classes. Yeah, I mean, you might be able to get somewhere with clustering analysis, but it might be not where you want to go, is what I will say there. All right, so to answer Johnny's question, I promised you a rant. I just had my third cup of coffee. I don't know if you can tell. I think I'm talking faster over the course of the live stream. But to answer Johnny's question, there is a benefit and a drawback to having a graphical tool. So the benefit is that you can probably get started sooner. The benefit is that, more types of people can use it. The drawback to moving away from a developer tooling set is that developer tooling sets are built to build software, right? With an arbitrary, or like up to you to determine how much complexity there is. When you remove the ability to have really fine-grained control over the behavior of a system, which is usually part of going towards a GUI-based system, like a low-code or a no-code environment, you lose flexibility. And sometimes that might not be an issue, right? So I think this particular system, which I chose because it was simple enough to do in an hour with tests and everything, sometimes for a very simple system, you might not need the flexibility, and it might make more sense for you to use something that is, a click and drag interface. But if you have a very complex use case, and a lot of people do, trying to create complexity with a system designed to reduce or eliminate it is awful. It is a bad time. And it's really a question of right tool for the job. So you don't always need developer tooling for everything, right? Great example of that is, LaTeX, right? Which is a typesetting software. I've used it a lot because a lot of the journals that I submitted to when I was doing research required it. But it's a lot of like fine-grained controlled detail, which can be very helpful in typesetting, but is very frustrating if what you want is a fully featured word processor that does everything for you. On the other hand, if I need my figures in a certain place and I need, certain qualities of a document, trying to do that in a fully featured, word processor like Word is bad. I don't know if y'all have seen the like memes on the internet about I move my, image 2 pixels in Word and my, spreadsheet shoots off to the moon and everything's changed and ruined forever. And that's the trade-off. So, yeah, I mean, it depends on your project. It depends on who is available to work on your project, and it depends on your level of complexity. But having a more, graphical click and drag type of interface might open up more use cases, but they are going to usually be simpler use cases, and it would close off really complex use cases. And Rasa is really built for, everyone along the scale, from very small, simple projects, where I think the part of the appeal is that it's open source and free and you can just get started right away, to like enterprise level projects that have, millions of queries a day, that have extremely complex, internal workings, that have compliance, that have specific security needs. And part of trying to support people all along that spectrum is, needing to maintain the ability to add complexity. So anyway, that was that was some product thinking from me, Rachel, who's not on the product team. But hopefully that's helpful. So yeah, you can do some of that stuff in Rasa X, not everything. And at some point, particularly with actions, particularly with custom actions, you're going to need to use developer toolings because you're doing developer job. Great. Johnny says I agree. Yeah, I hope that helps. I don't mean to say that it is a bad thing to have. I mean to say that it is a thing that I don't know that it makes sense for Rasa to have right now. All right, with that really long tirade, I'm gonna wrap it up for the day. So we went from moodbot, which is the project that gets made when you run Rasa init, to a product that fulfills this PRD. I'm gonna replace this. I don't know that this is of high quality enough that I want it to live on a Rasa repo. I might share this on my personal GitHub. I might not. You could always just follow along and do the typing yourself if you really, really wanted to. If there's a real Sammy sandwiches out there, my apologies. This is fictional. Any resemblance to, persons living or dead, purely coincidental, not intended, etc., etc., etc. Yeah, so we took the product requirements, we structured them into intents and stories and things that our assistant would need to do. We removed the unnecessary functionality from moodbot and we added our own functionality, and then we wrote tests and we ran the tests and we got results that make me confident that our system does the very specific things we set out for the system to do. So that's the live stream for this week. We will be back next Wednesday. I know there was no office hours this Wednesday, but we will. Was there office hours this? No, there was no office hours this Wednesday. There's no office hours this Wednesday. We will have office hours next Wednesday with Henry from Customer Success, who's fabulous. And then on Friday, we'll have more live streaming at this time. And I'm thinking, no promises, but I've been thinking a lot about over-engineering and some of the headaches people have gotten themselves into. So I might talk a little bit about over-engineering and too much ML. like when enough is enough, and you should probably call it a day. So that might be what I talk about next week. Yeah, so we'll see you on Wednesday for office hours. It's going to be at 9 a.m. And then next Friday for live streaming, which is going to be at 1 p.m. at this time. Thanks so much for joining today, and I hope you have a wonderful time building things with Rasa. And if you have questions for us, head to it's on the side. Head to the forums. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week. Bye.